the ceremony today, Amy, that you undertook to comfort Daniel when he was in distress. And you're going to need to be doing that very, very soon. Because when I say I am Daniel's dad, I mean I am his biological father. And I know he's long harboured the ambition that he was adopted and will eventually inherit a milk brand. But I'm afraid to say that the real truth of it is, Dan, you are like poor old Arthur Dent in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a descendant of a long and distinguished race of hairdressers. Some of you may be wondering why I'm giving this speech, because it's sort of normally the custom at this point in a wedding for someone to stand up and say, "Pray silence for the father of the bride." And then the father of the bride should then stand up and deliver an encomium to his daughter, eulogising her as a cross between Mother Teresa, Marie Curie, Florence Nightingale and Joan of Arc, winding up his tearful peroration, bemoaning the fact that he's not so much gained a son as lost a daughter. Well, for reasons which I've been too idle to fabricate, Greg is still speechless. And actually the truth is a bit more prosaic. Those of you who have more than a passing acquaintance with Dan probably realise that although largely self-taught, he is what our Scots cousins refer to as a skilled and canny linguist, a skill that he was somewhat slow to demonstrate in his early life. Though he's always shown great facility with written language, his oral skills were somewhat less well developed, such that I frequently uttered the observation that it was difficult to remember that English was his first language. And I was reminded of an incident on one of our daily trips to school, where we used to drive past the Jordan's Meeting House, which on this particular occasion had been severely damaged by fire in the previous night. Dan pointed this out to me by asking what had happened to the Quaker Meeting House. Some heated discussion ensued. Should we dive in there and see whether, as a result of this fire, there were plates of crispy duck to be had? And as is often the case when I get in the car with Dan, we started speculation. Was the fire accidental? Had we stumbled into some sort of turf war with the Latter-day Saints of Donald Duck? Were Huey, Dewey and Louie the arsonists? Did Disney want to acquire the final resting place of William Penn, founder of Pennsylvania, and has resorted to underhand tactics to get what they wanted? Now, I do miss our chats in those long car journeys, Dan. What reminded me of this incident was when Amy and Dan came to tell me they were getting married, because after congratulating them, I asked Dan who he planned to have as his best man. "I'll be the best man," he replied. "But that just doesn't work," I said. "Of course it does. It's obvious the bride is there to collect her best man, and that is me." Impeccable logic, total impracticality. I had to explain to him gently that one of the tasks of the best man is to propose the toast to the bride and groom. And that was not something that he should do for himself, notwithstanding he might have an ego the size of a small planet. And with some reluctance, which I couldn't quite fathom, he agreed that I should be the one to propose this toast. Now, what I didn't tell him was what the real function of a best man is. And because I'm going to quote here, and I know that Dan is always alert to plagiarism and insists that I give proper references to any quoted material, I'm going to borrow a trick he used extensively in his academic career, and the following is extracted from Crispin White's previously published work, figure of speech than more frequently quoted military intelligence. So, our current situation is that the bride has emerged from the wedding ceremony, dewy-eyed, deeply in love, and looking forward to a long, happy and blissful life together with her new man, and is generally viewing the world through rose-tinted spectacles. And as I look across at the expression on Amy's face, I can see that my summary may include a slight element of hyperbole. And then my mission as best man is to dispel the bride's warm romantic glow and ensure that she leaves for the honeymoon convinced that she has made the dreadful mistake of marrying a depraved, degenerate, borderline criminal pervert. and this, of course, is the real reason why women cry at weddings. Incidentally, the last time I set these propositions out as a best man, the groom worked for the police, tracking down missing persons, and I asked what I thought was the perfectly reasonable question as to how hard my mission was going to be. After all, he spent most of his week trying to track down and befriend vulnerable young women on the streets, and I had to admire him for managing to get the taxpayer to pay him for carrying out this important work. Now, Amy, there is a smidgen of good news, because although Dan is a black belt cyber stalker in working life, he is just too lazy to get off the sofa to actually pursue anybody in person. So what other major defects can I draw to your attention? And Dan knows what I'm going to say now. He didn't do geography. Good news, you can still trust him to keep his colouring inside the lines, but you really do need to remember the sat-nav. And one of the things you'll find on any trip with Dan is that you will get the incessant, "I'm nearly there yet." But it is quite diverting because he is able to ask this in about 15 different languages. And I particularly like the Icelandic version, which, if I can render it correctly, comes out as "Where are your toes?" And at this point, speakers often will give some tips about how to keep your marriage happy. And I thought long and hard about this, and I'm not a great fan of the "do as I say, not as I do" school of advice. And the only advice I was given by my father was that in the choice of a future wife, one should look for a woman who did not like the skin of the custard, advice that he himself had failed to follow. And if that was his only regret from married life, he probably got quite a lot right. But given the distressing demise of custard as a regular component of current culinary practice, I think as a guide to life, it's rather redundant. So I'm going to use my mother's wisdom, which is, if you can't say anything nice, say nothing. And when it comes to saying something nice about Dan, I really have quite a lot to say. I can still vividly remember the day when his mother summoned me upstairs to check that she was reading the pregnancy test correctly. It was an exciting time in our lives, with other life-changing events going on. 3 months into the pregnancy, I suddenly had the opportunity to leave my previous employers and work for myself. Much of that time was a blur, but I do remember us having some heated discussions about what our baby was to be named. And the fashion at the time was to name your child after the place in which it was conceived. And indeed, we toyed with this for a while. There was really no debate about his first name being Matt. What we couldn't quite agree on was how his middle names, in the ensuite, should be hyphenated. But in the end, I guess we both felt that it was a bit too much of a mouthful. Sorry. Dan's due date was Christmas Eve, And contraction started bang on time at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was an icy Saturday morning with a powdering overnight snow on the roads as we legged it into Wickham Hospital. And then everything became a rush to wait. I safely secured the last BLT on the shelves at M&S, which felt like a real last chopper out of Saigon moment. And we spent a somewhat restless night in a deserted maternity ward. In retrospect, it felt like one more occupying one of those deserted institutional buildings so beloved of Lewis and Midsummer Murders. And on Christmas morning, Zoe's contractions restarted, and after a somewhat protracted labour, Daniel was born at lunchtime. And after the midwife team had cleaned him up, he was placed in my arms, and I had three immediate thoughts. First, and I am slightly ashamed of this, when I looked down at this little pink, wrapped up bundle, I thought to myself, I bloody well hope there are plenty of pigs in blankets for lunch. Swiftly, this thought was succeeded by the realisation that by sharing a birthday with a baby Jesus, it was going to be very difficult to get friends to come to his birthday parties. Now, I have to say I admire Dan's pragmatic solution to this. Demoting Jesus by changing your religion is genius. And then finally, I wondered where I was going to be able to get one of those bumper stickers which read, Dan is for life, not just for Christmas. And then it hits you, as I think it hits all first-time fathers. It's visceral and almost physical as you suddenly realise the responsibility attached to the child lying in your arms. And it illustrates to me one of the main differences between men and women, because of course Dan's mother had been shouldering that responsibility for the previous 9 months, while I had just been carrying on in blissful ignorance. And I do hope with 2020 hindsight that Dan and his mother will feel that when the time came, I did actually manage to get my arse down the hill into the battle, as our family expression goes. But looking back on things now, I realise that there was something that I should have done at the time and I don't think I did. And I'm going to bleed the Dirty Harry defence on this one, you know, in all the excitement, ... And I'm going to take the opportunity today to rectify that omission. Zoe, I don't think I ever really thanked you properly for giving me the joyous gift of Dan, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. And Dan has been a joyous gift every day since then. But whilst there have been many ups and downs in our relationship, I've not had one day when I didn't feel joy, love and pride in having him as my son. And that joy and comfort has not just been in big things, but in small things as well. Now, my father's initial solution to any bump in the road of life was to make a cup of tea, and that's a practice I followed. And then, having made my cup up, I set it down on what is one of my most treasured possessions. It's a drinks mat that Dan made for me on Father's Day many years ago, and which I use every day. And that simple action makes me feel instantly better. And Dan, if you do ever organise that Viking longboat funeral for me, this is the only item I want to be sure to take with me to the afterlife. Now, Amy, I don't wish to sound like Gollum, but today Zoe and I are giving you our precious to take care of from now on. Well, up to a point. My dad always used to say that you stop worrying about your children when they reach retirement age. So it is our sincere wish that you and Dan will enjoy a long life of love and happiness together. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would ask that you now stand to drink a toast to Amy and Dan to wish them that happy future. Amy and Dan. I have very quickly one other small toast to give, and that's to the people who aren't able to be here today, and for Amy in particular, who will be missing her mum Katrina. So, absent friends.